media station.
Gauging a massive project. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. A crane that can lift 1,000 tons near the site now of a collapsed highway bridge in Baltimore. A massive cargo ship felling the span Tuesday after hitting one of its main supports. Experts now trying to figure out how to break up that bridge in pieces that can be lifted and cleared. Fox's Griff Jenkins in Baltimore.
Conditions are rough. There's gale force wind gusts that they're experiencing and slowing things down to reopen the port that handles more cars and light trucks than any other port in the country. President Biden says he wants to see it for himself. Officials here say they plan to tackle this monumental task in 3 steps. First, they want to clear the channel. Second, they want to tow the ship, the dolly, out of the channel. Third, they want to remove the debris that's blocking the waterways around the channel.
4 workers are still missing and presumed dead. New York City prosecutors suggesting former President Trump violated a gag order in his hush money trial.
Manhattan prosecutors asking the judge to clarify whether a gag order issued for the former president bars him from making statements about the court's staff or families, referencing a Truth Social post where he claims the judge's daughter makes money by working to get Trump, falsely accusing her of posting a photo showing him behind bars. The Trump legal team says the judge can't order him to do something that the gag order does not require, adding they would be entitled to a hearing if the order is expanded. The former president has pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts charged with falsifying business records to cover up payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. The trial is set to start April 15th. Kristen Goodwin, Fox News.
Pope Francis skipping the traditional Good Friday procession at Rome's Colosseum to protect his health. The Pope now scheduled today to preside over a lengthy evening Easter vigil in St. Peter's Basilica. America's listening to Fox News.
Interesting people are talking to Will Kane.
I said, what do I call you? I call you Dwayne. I call you The Rock. He said, now that I own it, I can call you The Rock.
Yes, I own it now. You can call me The Rock.
Our next guest needs no introduction. It is Dr. Jordan Peters, my old friend and frenemy, Stephen A. Smith.
What is going on here? I see the Will Kane show in the background. I see the microphone.
Watch it live at noon Eastern, Monday through Thursday on FoxNews.com. And get the podcast 5 days a week at FoxNewsPodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm Brian Kilmeade, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Subscribe and listen now by going to FoxNewsPodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
The legal challenges continue for President Biden's son.
Hunter Biden did not appear inside a California courtroom while his lawyer, Abby Lowell, argued this past Wednesday for his criminal tax evasion charges to be dismissed. Lowell argued the charges were politically motivated and that the government was taking on the, quote, least ordinary prosecution a person could imagine. The president's son is facing trial after a lengthy investigation by special counsel David Weiss, who's accused Biden of not paying his income taxes from January of 2017 to October of 2020 and of filing false tax reports. The judge will rule on dismissing the charges by April 17th. In Washington, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
In battle, New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez has hopes about a re-election. Others say he needs to leave Capitol Hill.
Bob Menendez showing staying power.
That there is no evidence of the giving or receiving of cash and gold bars.
Despite a stack of criminal indictments accusing him of doing the bidding of Egypt and Qatar, the New Jersey Democrat hopes to cling to power running as an independent. His trial looms in May. Pennsylvania's John Fetterman is stunned. Senators aren't trying to drum Menendez out. Fetterman wants the Senate to expel Menendez and the governor to appoint New Jersey Congressman Andy Kim, the frontrunner in the race for the Menendez seat. There's worry that an independent candidacy by Menendez could steal votes from Kim. That could put into play a seat Democrats expected to hold.
Fox's Chad Pergram in Washington. The funeral for slain New York City police officer Jonathan Diller taking place today at St. Rose of Lima Roman Catholic Church. Diller was murdered after investigating a vehicle illegally parked at a bus stop in Far Rockaway on Monday. New York Governor Kathy Hochul attending the wake Friday afternoon, just minutes after arriving. Former President Trump attended the wake on Thursday. I'm Paul Stevens. This is Fox News.
74 and sunny on Saturday. Southwest winds 15 to 20, gusting to 30. Easter Sunday will be at 75 and a touch more humid. Monday looking okay, warm, mostly cloudy 76. Tuesday is warm and windy ahead of the rainfall, which will come as the sun sets. From the WVLT Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Ben Cathy.
You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Hello, East Tennessee. Welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. And we are going to talk about all things Tennessee baseball this morning. We have the voice of the Tennessee BaseVols, John Wilkerson. He's been such a stalwart in the industry and in Knoxville. I've been listening to John for so long on Sports Talk, and it's just tremendous to have him in the studio. He is, as I mentioned, the voice of UT baseball. Good morning, John. Great to have you with us.
Appreciate the invite, Jim. How are you?
I'm great. You know, I know when we booked you, it was to really focus on Vol baseball. But I have to talk about that game last night up in Detroit.
Yeah.
It was quite a run. Give your thoughts on where Tennessee basketball is going into that Elite Eight game against Purdue. What do you think the chances are we get to our first Final Four?
Well, they've got a shot, and that's something that Tennessee, hasn't always had. And so I think, one, you have a team that plays so well together. I think it's been rare. You know, last night with Santiago Vescovi missing the game was the first time that they didn't have their intended starting lineup on the floor. Now, it took a little while before Zakai Ziegler was able to be 100% and get into the starting lineup early on this season, but Tennessee has been incredibly, I think that's the first missed game from a starter this season, and that is so incredibly rare. But this is a group that has come together. They work so hard, and they've earned everything that they've accomplished to this point. Regular season champs, the SEC tournament game notwithstanding, the only time that they didn't have a chance to, the only time that they failed on a chance to get revenge on an earlier loss. So, as Coach Rick Barnes said after last night's game, Purdue is better from the earlier season meeting as they met out in Hawaii. It was a 4-point win for the Boilermakers, and they have crossed paths so many times in these preseason tournaments. Now they meet in the postseason for the second time. Purdue is better, and I think it's going to be one heck of a matchup, just as things pointed to last night's game being a remarkable back and forth. And Creighton led by a point at the half, and Tennessee, they had one flurry where they were able to hit from three and make shots in transition, and Tennessee in the second half just played a stifling defense, which is their most characteristic trait. And so I just thought that both teams were able to, at one point or another, control the game, but Tennessee did such a good job of locking them down in the second half.
I had we were at home with my wife, and that my daughter, she's a senior in high school, and her boyfriend was over, who plays basketball and playing in college, actually. He will be. And I was getting so fired up when we were on that 18-0 run. I was yelling, and Dee was like, "Stop yelling, you're bothering the dogs." I was like, "It's just us." But I was at the Purdue game in, I guess, 2019 in Louisville, where they beat us in overtime. And my daughter,
like on the 3-point shot,
yeah, he just
book.
Brazed them.
Yeah.
And my daughter at the time was 13, and she's a huge basketball fan. And she was so distraught and upset. And when the brackets came out this year, she's like, "I do not want to play Purdue in the Elite Eight." But I was just like, let's just get there first.
Right.
So it was very, very exciting times for the basketball team. Before I get to ball baseball, I do want to ask you this, John. Rick Barnes is so universally liked and respected in the coaching fraternity and in college basketball. And McDermott mentioned that last night in his postgame about how happy he is for Rick Barnes. And, of course, the Purdue coach, he's never been to the Final Four either, I don't think. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. But I suspect that there are a lot of coaches in college basketball that are out that are going to be pulling for Rick Barnes.
I think you're right. When you take a look at everybody that shared comments and support when he reached 800 wins earlier this season, it was one heck of a video.
It was incredible.
Yeah, that the University of Tennessee put together. And I just think it comes from, Rick wasn't always on the path that he's on now. I mean, he was a fiery young man, and especially when he got to Clemson, he didn't mind ruffling the other side's feathers. But he himself has owned that he hasn't always been on the path that he should have been in his mind as a coach, and always looking forward to and looking at how he can best help the young men that play for him. And now I think when you look at how long that he's been able to do what he's done so well, what has been missing has been the ultimate success. At Texas, where he had his longest tenure, he wound up with one trip to the Final Four, his only trip to the Final Four as a coach, and didn't come away with a championship. So I do think that people have pointed to what has been a lack of success in terms of big-time accomplishments in the postseason as some sort of reflection on his abilities as a coach. And I think other coaches look at how he's operated, how he does approach the game, how he knows the game. And I think there are so many things that factor into whether a team has success in the postseason versus not, and some of it is just dumb luck. It can be a draw that's especially tough for one team, even though they might have the better personnel. It's just styles of play that aren't suited for their success.
Well, and you get a guy just doesn't hit. I mean, look at R.J. Davis for North Carolina, first-team All-American. He goes 0 for 9 from 3. I mean, that guy's a great player. That doesn't mean that he's can't win in March. I mean, that's silly. So it is kind of unusual. But I would. It just would be so refreshing to see him get a Final Four. Of course, as a lifelong Tennessee fan, I'd be so excited. And then if we're going to get there, we might as well just win the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah, this is just the third time that a Tennessee basketball team has won 3 games in an NCAA tournament. Bruce Pearl did it, and it was interesting to have him on the panel last night on CBS or on the broadcast talking about the ins and outs and breaking it down. Conzo Martin, when they started in the first 4, is the only other one. They won 3 games, but their first win was in Dayton to get into the bracket. But it's an interesting trio. Bruce Pearl, Conzo Martin, and Rick Barnes are the only Tennessee coaches to win 3 games in a single NCAA
that's a great
tournament.
word.
But I do think that you have, as you were talking about, I think you have a lot of support for Coach Barnes simply for how he approaches the game, how he knows the game, and without question how he loves the game.
Before we leave basketball, I want to ask you about the Lady Vols. They entered the NCAA tournament as a 6th seed, and they came up short against North Carolina State in the round of 32. They had been to 2 Sweet 16s in a row. What is your view of there's been a lot of chatter. Mm-hmm. What is your view of the Lady Vol program and where they stand right now moving forward?
Well, can't help but appreciate the fact of just what is Kelly Harper played for Pat Summitt. At the same time, you can point to just haven't been able to reach the heights in the Southeastern Conference that Tennessee expects to be a part of. Now, this year they played undefeated South Carolina, the best that anybody has played them.
Twice.
Right. And then but they came up short. They were in position to win the game in the SEC tournament semifinals, and it just was you bank in a 3-point shot from a player who had not attempted a 3-point shot this season, and it was just heartbreak. I do think that there are a couple of things that are fair to wonder. Kelly has not been able to have the recruiting success that Tennessee has had in the past from high school seniors. They have done a very nice job of pulling pieces from the portal, but it is going to be something next year to see exactly how that team takes the floor when you're missing such a superstar like Rakia Jackson. There's not an obvious one-to-one as somebody, and I don't know that you can immediately have one person fill that role, but I just don't know that there is enough right now in terms of support from within the program, in terms of the players you can project in their growth and development that can help offset what they're about to lose. So it's very key. And again, while you have Dawn Staley, who is just crushing it at South Carolina, and you have Kim Mulkey, who entered the conference taking over LSU, looks like right now the highest that Tennessee can project to is third. And for longtime Lady Vol fans,
that's right. What we're used to.
And, of course, then again, nobody's ever going to match what Pat Summitt did in her tenure.
And the game's different, too. It's much more popular. There's much more people playing. It's more competitive.
Yes.
So it's not as easy as it was.
Correct.
Not that it was easy for Pat, but.
Right.
Yeah. We're visiting with John Wilkerson this morning. I've been a lifelong Tennessee sport fan. I started going to football games when I was about 5 or 6 years old with my dad. I went to Stokely Athletic Center, went to basketball games. I swear, I think I could sit here and talk to John for hours about sports. He's just an encyclopedia. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tennessee baseball. They're ranked 5th in the country. Of course, they've been to the College World Series 2 of the last 3 years. They had a rough night last night, but they can still come back and win the series with Georgia. So we'll talk about UT baseball. Stay with us as we visit with John Wilkerson here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Accurate weather reports you can count on. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
8817 Kingston Pike is where East Tennessee gets engaged. That's Professional Jewelers. Yes, spring is in the air, love is in the air, but you don't need any special occasion. Sure, there's the landmark occasions, there's the Valentine's, the birthdays, the Christmas, all of that. But sometimes you just need to say, I love you, or I got to get this watch fixed. I got to get this jewelry fixed. Professional Jewelers buys your gold where East Tennessee gets engaged. 8817 Kingston Pike and Athens.
Chuck Fleischman here. One of my proudest privileges as your congressman is nominating young Americans to our military service academies. Our nation needs a new generation of leaders if we're able to remain safe, free, and prosperous. And that's why I take this part of my job so seriously. Revered institutions like West Point, the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, Coast Guard Academy, and Merchant Marine Academy stand ready to teach, train, and equip these leaders of tomorrow. If you or someone you know is interested in attending one of America's elite military service academies, you should attend my annual East Tennessee Military Service Academy Day on Saturday, April 20th at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. For more information, visit me online at fleischman.house.gov and click Military Academy Nominations under Serving You. I hope to see you there.
Paid for with official funds from the office of Chuck Fleischman.
We're teaming up with Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria to give you the $1 Million Madness Bracket Challenge. This year, we're stepping into the hysteria by giving you the chance to win $1 million. Follow all the buzzer-beating action by checking on your bracket today. And if you made the perfect picks, that's $1 million bracket. Get 60 picks, that's $10,000. There's a $500 prize for the best bracket in East Tennessee. Check up on your bracket today at newstalk987.com. Presented by Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. Any bracket is just better with Barley's.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. We're visiting with John Wilkerson, and we're talking about UT sports, and of course we want to talk about Tennessee baseball. I know we did that whole first segment on basketball, but it is such an exciting time of the year with this run of Tennessee to their second Elite Eight in history, and hopefully they can get by Purdue tomorrow and make their first Final Four. Tennessee baseball ranked number 5 in the nation. They've won 22 games. Really, it's remarkable because since Tony Vitello got here, because if you really look at all of the sports on the college landscape, in the SEC, they're strongest really at baseball. They're even better than at football. And it's so hard to turn around a baseball team, yet he's done it. Can you just talk a little bit about his tenure and what he's been able to accomplish? Is it coaching? Is it recruiting? Is it all of the above? Is it energy, enthusiasm? I guess all those things.
Yeah, you continue to check boxes or add boxes that should be checked, because from the time that he was named head coach, and this is the lasting legacy of John Curry as Tennessee Athletics Director, is he hired Tony Vitello, this is a vision that he has had from the moment he put on that orange blazer and was introduced to us at Lindsey Nelson Stadium on the field, because he came through the ranks as a player. He was at Missouri and then went from playing at Missouri to being a part of that coaching staff, and then realized that he needed to broaden his horizon. So he went and took a job at another program at TCU, went from TCU to Arkansas. Arkansas was where he really was able to, one, have a significant impact. Not that he didn't impact Missouri and TCU, but this is where he also started to build the reputation as being an outstanding recruiter and somebody that was much more sooner rather than later going to get his own program. And so John Currie hired him, and he had missed out on an opportunity. He had interviewed the year before at Missouri, his alma mater, but they went in a different direction. And so when he was given the nod, one, I think he's incredibly loyal and so thankful for the opportunity that it was very early in his tenure that teams like Florida State, who had just had a legendary coach in Mike Martin, step aside at that point in time, and other teams, Texas A&M, wanted him real bad. It was thought that he was in the mix at LSU before they made their most recent hire. But
you're really getting into top royalty when you start talking about LSU baseball.
Exactly.
And A&M has been a sleeping giant,
without a doubt. And so I just think that from the moment he became Tennessee's head coach, he's had an exact vision as to what he wanted to see in terms of from his players on the field, as well as what he wanted from his players off the field. And you look at his very early hires. Quentin Everhart is a strength coach. Frank Anderson is pitching coach. Josh Elander, who he had been with at a previous stop and was also graduate assistant at Arkansas. He brought him. Anderson and Elander have been with him every year that he's been at Tennessee. And you have Frank Anderson, who was National Pitching Coach of the Year just 2 years ago. He's been remarkable. Josh Elander, again, he's had opportunities and has been on list to become a head coach himself, but I also think he is in a wonderful position.
He's waiting on the right opportunity.
Exactly.
He can be picky.
100%. And I just think both have helped shape. Elander, like Tony, is an outstanding recruiter. And, of course, Coach Anderson's Coach Anderson. But for them to be able to build the program as they did. In 21, they made it to the College World Series. It was in 19, let's go back to first year. Tennessee had won 7 SEC games the year before. They were projected at 6.5 was going into his first year. And they went into the last game of that season. They go into that final Saturday, and if they win at Missouri, they go to the SEC tournament, which not everybody's guaranteed a spot. So they came up just short, but the very next year is when they returned to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2005. In 2020, the team had lost twice at the time everything shut down.
Yeah, that 2020 team really was good, and they had Garrett Crochet.
Yes, and a number of veterans in the lineup, and Crochet, who just made his very first major league start on opening day after a couple of years in the bullpen. He's the last player to go straight from college baseball to the major leagues. It was a different circumstance because he was drafted in 20. As they had put together the season they did in terms of how Major League approached playing in the pandemic. But yeah, he made his very first start. It was like the 9th guy in 110 years that made his very first start on opening day. If he had gotten any run support, who knows? But he 6 innings, 1 run. He scattered, I think, 5 hits, struck out 8 without a walk. He was remarkable. But Garrett Crochet was on that team, had just made it back to the mound because they were mindful of some tenderness that he had in his arm. But they made the NCAA tournament in 19. They were really good in 20 when everything shut down. 21, you're the number 1 team in the nation for essentially 2 months. No, excuse me.
22.
My bad. Yeah. 21, you win the East and you get to the College World Series. You host a super regional for the first time in forever. And so you get there. And then 22 was when they were out.
Yeah, I was heartbroken by that team because they were so good.
They were.
Pitching and hitting. They were number 1 in the country in both categories.
9 losses for the entire
season. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You mentioned, you did mention Tony Vitello is very loyal. And, when he got here, the baseball facilities were really bottom of the barrel in the SEC, and we've been steadily increasing investing in facilities, and Tennessee is stepping up to the plate, and I know they've made commitments to Tony, and he's been a big part of how that gets done. Let's talk about the Tennessee fan base and Tennessee athletics in general, because it seems to me like Tony Vitello loves it here. Mm-hmm. And then you hear Rick Barnes talk about Tennessee. He's been here 9 years. And he said he talks about it as if he's never been in a place like Tennessee. But people don't know that until they get here. What is it about the University of Tennessee and East Tennessee that once people get here, the fan base is so committed to supporting a winning team? What is it, though, about the community that makes these coaches love the University of Tennessee?
One, I think the setting is remarkable because of all that you have at your disposal. Whatever your interests are, whether it's indoors, outdoors, you name it, I just think that you have the ability to do it. So I think geographically you're blessed with a remarkable setting. And then I also think you have you don't have the competition that would come from pro sports because there are the teams in Nashville, and you can go on out to Memphis to find others, but I just think that this is such a remarkable college town that that's a big part of it. And I think for the most part, I mean, you do have those that it is life and death, and you have some that are just simply never going to be happy, like there are in a segment of every fan base. But I think, again, that's such a minority in regards to the Big Orange Country conversation. But I just think the setting, the fact that you have a number of people that simply love to support the University of Tennessee, and if you show your investments and your ability to build a winner, you're going to be rewarded for that with great fan support.
Absolutely. Now, John, you spend your days watching and talking about sports. So what's a hobby for many people? And it's funny, back in high school, I thought maybe I would go into sportscasting. I was very interested in that. I ended up not doing that, of course. I don't know that my East Tennessee accent, it would be great for radio. Of course, now here I am with the show. But how do you get started in, how did you get started in sports broadcasting? And with it being your actual job, does that change things a little bit? I mean, it doesn't sound like it does. You sound so passionate. You're such a fan. But talk about that balance. Well,
it's something that as I was growing up, at times it was mentioned that, hey, you have a nice speaking voice. And then my father, who was on the faculty, a member of the faculty at the University of Tennessee, as part of what he loved doing, he had his pilot's license before he had his driver's license growing up. And so he worked with UT flight operations, and one of his responsibilities would be to fly John Ward back from wherever Tennessee was playing on the road. He would fly John Ward and the game film back to Knoxville so they could all be prepped for the coaches' show the next day. So as Dad flew with John Ward, he asked if he wouldn't share a thought or two with me on how you become a sportscaster or get into broadcasting. And I've always remembered what John shared with me. It was a phone call, and really appreciated the opportunity to talk with him. And he just laid out some nuts and bolts, first in what would help me get comfortable speaking in front of people. And he also said that when given the opportunity, read as much as you can, whatever it is that holds your interest. I'll never forget, what do you like to read? And it's like, well, primarily Sports Illustrated. He goes, well, read that as much as you can. And at times, if you want to, stand in front of a mirror and read aloud from what it is you enjoy reading, because that would make you comfortable speaking aloud. That's interesting. Speaking publicly. But did you have a hard time speaking publicly at first, or were you always naturally a performer? While I was a student I did go through drama and chorus at Bearden High School way back when. But still, when I got to the University of Tennessee, I was not a comfortable public speaker. And giving class presentations, I could get through it, but I had to grip the podium with both hands because I was simply going to shake. Well, that's remarkable to hear that. Campus radio station was where, in being able to do a 6-hour shift, because I didn't want to do 2 shifts. I did 1 shift on Saturday night, 6 hours. That's where I really became comfortable in just speaking, knowing that it was being heard publicly by how many, I don't know, but that's kind of where it went. But from that point forward, and then I was blessed with, I've had the opportunity to work for 3 or 4 different radio groups in Knoxville, and I've been here for 30 years now in this group of stations. Yeah, and you do a phenomenal job. The Tennessee offense, before we get to our next break, I do want to mention that. So 65 home runs prior to last night. They're really on quite a pace. I don't think it's quite the pace of the 22 team. No. But it's close. But it is close. And Georgia right now is just setting the world on fire in terms of home runs, and they had a bunch of them last night. Yeah, well, how many do they have? They had 74 coming into this series, and they hit 3, I think, last night. And Tennessee's number 2 in college baseball was 65. So he's put together quite a lineup. Is
pitching depth, is that the biggest concern, do you think, the bullpen or the starting? With A.J. Russell being hurt, talk a little bit about that impact with him being hurt right now.
Yeah, I think
who you thought you was going to be your ace.
I think it's more health than depth, because I think you've got those that you pointed to as being the veterans to lead the way. A.J. Causey has been remarkable, as A.J. Russell was the Friday starter, and in his second start this season.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in this week to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI. We're visiting with John Wilkerson, such a great voice for Tennessee sports, and of course he's the voice of the Tennessee baseball Vols. Before we get back to John, however, it is time for Dollars and Cents.
Want to be sure you are getting the most out of your retirement? For all the years of your retirement? That's the primary goal of More Living with Jim Brogan and our Dollars and Cents segment, where we provide you with an important financial tip that will help positively impact the quality of your life in retirement. And now, here's Jim with this week's Dollars and Cents tip.
The danger of target date retirement funds. These have become very popular over the years. It's kind of a way you can, in many 401k plans, set it and forget it. You know, you can pick an allocation. You can say 2030 if you're thinking you might retire in 2030. You don't have to pick the year you're going to retire. It just, as if you pick a 2030 fund, as you get closer to 2030, it's going to naturally get more conservative on its own. And so that's why they kind of self-manage themselves. Those target date funds actually go out and they buy other mutual funds to provide some diversification. Here's the challenge and the problem. Target date funds going into this year were actually in the negative for the prior 2 years. And it kind of goes back to what we've seen the last 5 years, that stocks and bonds have been more correlated than they've been historically. Historically, bonds have been negatively correlated to stocks. So if stocks are way down, bonds would be up a little bit and help buffer the blow. But that hasn't worked very well the last 5 years. And in 2022, the average target date fund saw a 15% decline, and then they only made 13% last year. So they're in the hole coming into 2024. And yet the market is hitting all-time highs. The challenge is that traditional balance of stocks and bonds, that traditional 60-40, 70-30 mix, depending on the target date. That traditional diversification has not worked very well the last 5 years, and I don't think in this new age we're in today, post-pandemic, I don't see it being as effective. I think that 40% bond mix has had a real challenge and has really weighed on people's portfolio returns. I think you just have to have a greater level of diversification with more things in the portfolio that if one thing zigs, another investment zags. More things like commodities and energy and natural resources and foreign bonds where you can hedge the dollar. The idea you have more things in your portfolio that hedge certain bad stock market conditions. If you're getting closer to retirement and you want to make your portfolio more conservative, I think a greater level of diversification will be more effective moving forward than these traditional target date retirement funds.
That's our Dollars and Cents segment for this week. You can find this week's Dollars and Cents segment and others by visiting BroganFinancial.com.
Check us out online, BroganFinancial.com. We've got all our podcasts. This show will be podcast Tuesday afternoon. You can also catch us at Spotify and at Apple, what's that called? Apple Podcasts.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, I'm not a big podcast guy, but we do have our show podcast. So check that out. Also, my next class is through Pellissippi State Community College, and this is through their adult outreach. It's a one-night class on Tuesday night, April the 9th. So this is a week from Tuesday, and it is income planning for retirement. So if you're getting close to retirement or you're retired, we specifically in that 1-2 hour class for one night focus on retirement income. When should you draw Social Security? How do you structure investments to provide predictable income in the short term when markets are volatile, but yet provide growth of income in the long term? And how do you minimize your tax burden in retirement? We're going to hit all of those income-centric things that I think every retiree needs to know about. So you can go to PellissippiRetirementIncome.com. Again, that's PellissippiRetirementIncome.com. It's Tuesday night, April 9th, 6:30 to 8:30. Would love to see you there. You can see all my upcoming classes. We have another class on tax planning in May. You can see all of our upcoming classes at BroganFinancial.com and just click on classes. We're talking about Vol baseball with John Wilkerson. We do have Barbara on the line who has a baseball question. Good morning, Barbara. Welcome to More Living. You're on the air. Good morning, Barbara. Barbara, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm calling about basketball, not baseball.
Oh, you're calling about baseball. Oh, I see here.
Basketball.
Okay, so you're asking about Jonas Adu. What's your question about Adu?
Why didn't he play last night?
Well, he did play.
Yes.
I think that he just played limited minutes. He was not terribly effective last night, and I noticed Walker played more than he did. And they didn't really get much from their inside game. I mean, they got good defense, and Awaka had some beautiful, as he always does, the way he rebounded. But actually, Barbara, thank you for your question. I think that's a good sign going into the Purdue game because those guys offensively didn't really bring much to the table. They weren't really hitting their 10 and 12-foot shots.
Yeah, there was a brief moment in the second half where Adu made a couple of quick mid-range jumpers around 10 feet or so. Just a couple to, I think, pull their 7-footer out a little bit of ways from the basket. But I just thought that Tobey Awaka was more effective in regards to the defensive side of things. And I think there were a couple of instances where they were able to run the pick and roll where the guard starts to make a move towards the lane and then the big man runs to the basket, and they were able to get a couple of alley-oops and or passes right at the hoop. And I just think that Coach Barnes was looking for somebody who did a better job of shutting that off last night. But
they needed his strength and physicality.
Very much.
Boy, they're gonna have their hands full tomorrow with Zach Edey.
Yes.
Do you think
the college player of the year?
You wonder is the key there? I wonder. I was listening to post game actually with Candace Parker and Bruce Pearl and those guys and gals, and I think Tennessee's intensity, the way they push the guard play defensively, and they get you out beyond where you want to be starting your sets, is that maybe one of the biggest keys, is that everything starts further out. Edey can't get on the low block. He gets the ball maybe further out.
Yeah, because I think, as you're right to point out, the big man for the Boilermakers is exactly where you need to limit the damage. What killed Tennessee in the first matchup with Purdue is they had a guard that couldn't miss from three. And so every now and then.
Who's that, Lawyer, I think?
I believe so.
It reminded me, it brought back memories of that 2019 game, that dude that put up 29 and had never scored more than 15 in his whole career.
Right. It really was something to see. And then if I'm not mistaken, both he and Grant Williams wound up being drafted by the Celtics. So all of a sudden they go from being combatants.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In the NCAA tournament, they then wound up as teammates in terms of their early days in the NBA. But yeah, I just think every now and then that can happen. You can focus too much of your energy. It's kind of like what many SEC coaches have dealt with this year. And it's like, do we focus on slowing down Dalton Knecht, or do we run the risk of being beaten by the rest of the team? And so I do think you have to have a plan for Edey to limit the damage that he does, but know that he's going to have an impact on the game, and then also make sure that you don't have somebody who goes crazy from beyond the arc.
Now let's pivot a little bit into pro baseball. First, let's not leave Knoxville. The Knoxville Smoky Stadium is slated to open. Is it for next year, 2025?
It is. We're inside of a year now in terms of their projected date.
Do you think this central location will bring in even more baseball fans? I mean, I'm awfully excited for what they're going to do with baseball here in Knoxville.
I am as well. One, to know that at the end of February, as they kind of updated the situation, that everything is on track. I just really think that it's impressive what they're building to. Actually, we're a little more than a year away. It's April next year that it's supposed to open, I believe. But anyhow, I just think it's remarkable how this has continued to evolve and what is its impact on the area. Because as you see, what is the goal and what they're building towards, you're going to have some really nice residential opportunities right there, right around the park, on the first baseline, on the third baseline, even beyond. And I do think that while the city of Knoxville dropped the ball years ago and ever letting the Smokies leave in the first place, the silver lining is I think it's a much better place for this stadium and what it's going to mean to that area of downtown, as well as right there bordering the old city to where it would have been. They were looking at State Street and near the Civic Coliseum as where the original plan for a brand new downtown park was going to be. So while, again, that era of Knoxville government was horrible in their decision-making, I do believe that Randy Boyd has had a perfect plan, and I do believe that you have a government that has embraced the opportunity, because I think it is just going to lift up the area. Kodak deserves so much credit for having a vision for what exactly we've seen Smoky Stadium do in helping build that portion of right there off the interstate on both sides, as well as what would normally be not until you got much closer into Sevierville and Pigeon Forge.
We're visiting with Tennessee voice John Wilkerson this morning. It's great to have him in studio. We come back, we'll pivot a little bit into Major League Baseball and also talk about Tennessee Vols that are in the pros. So stay with us. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. You can catch us every Saturday, 9 to 10 a.m. and again from 3 to 4 p.m. You can now also catch all of our podcasts. You can go to BroganFinancial.com or go to Apple Podcast or Spotify and download all of our content. We're thrilled to visit with John Wilkerson, just a voice on radio for years and years and years. I'm such a big sports fan. Really, I can't even remember a day where I wasn't listening to John Wilkerson on the radio. So it's great to have him in studios. First time we've had him, we've had Jimmy Himes a couple of times, but this is the first time we've had you, and it's just great to visit with you. Major League Baseball, let's talk about Vols in the pros, especially just the last few years, because with this surge, with what Tony Vitello's done, we've really had some players last year was was it 2 years ago, the most drafted players we'd ever seen?
Yes.
And I think I saw something, Trey Lipscomb got called up.
Correct.
So can you bring us up to date on some of the players over the last 2 or 3 years and what's exciting in their careers?
Yeah, well, there were 3 VFLs that were on opening day rosters. And so you had Yan Gomes, who is with the Chicago Cubs, getting ready for he started his 13th season, and he really found a nice home in Chicago. He's played for a number of different organizations. Then you had Nick Senzel, who had just made his move from Cincinnati to Washington. And boy, Nick he was drafted, I think, the number 2 player in the draft, which would technically be the highest drafted Tennessee player from the Tennessee program. Luke Hochever was picked first, but he had also played independent league baseball before he was drafted by the Royals. But anyhow, with Senzel, he just has not been able to catch a break. And so he's so excited because he's from Knoxville. Lane Thomas, who was signed by Tennessee, but he went straight to pro ball. He's found a home in D.C. And so here you had former Bearden Bulldog, former Farragut Admiral, and they're kind of having a blast being teammates. And Nick, opening night, he's taking ground balls before the game and breaks his thumb. So he goes on the shelf, and then you have Trey Lipscomb, who is right there on the cusp. He was somebody who waited 3 years to become a starter at the University of Tennessee and then was a first-team All-American and should have been SEC Player of the Year. But now he gets to make his Major League debut because, unfortunately, he has to take the spot for Nick, and so he's going to slide into third base. Garrett Crochet is the other in terms of the 3 that were on opening day rosters. Last year, Ben Joyce, also a former Farragut Admiral and also played for Walter State, he made his Major League debut with the Angels, and then you had Andre Lipsius, another VFL under the Tony Vitello, from the Tony Vitello era. He made his major league debut with the Detroit Tigers late in the season. He got traded preseason this year to the Los Angeles Dodgers. So while they factor in the mix in terms of having spots on the 40-man roster, they right now are not with their respective major league clubs. So right now it's a handful, but you have a raft of guys. Chase Dolander is probably the next pick to click in terms of pitcher with the Rockies organization.
So he's moving fast.
He is. Jordan Beck was named the Rockies Player of the Spring, so he is also
on a good path
quickly through their organization. And then last year, although he was the probably the top prospect in the Astros organization, when Houston traded for Justin Verlander from the Mets, Drew Gilbert was sent from Houston to the Mets, and now he and Blade Tidwell, they were teammates at Tennessee, and now teammates in the Mets organization as they played in Double-A last year. He is also somebody that
he's kind of on the list to maybe get called up this year. Maybe.
Exactly. So you've got a number of guys that are ahead of what would have been the normal projection. Here's a fun fact: Trey Lipscomb actually made it to the major leagues in a shorter time from being drafted by the Nationals than it took him to get into the starting lineup at Tennessee.
Yeah, he was very patient. Who was the guy that played before him that was so good that was ahead of him at Tennessee at third base?
You had Jake Rucker.
That's it. That's who I was thinking about, because
he's in the Twins organization with Alaric Solari.
Yeah, I mean he was great, and then all of a sudden Lipscomb finally gets his chance in his fourth year in the program.
Correct.
And he's an All-American.
Yes,
it's unbelievable. So what I'm excited about on that front is, and we were talking off air there, John, that I grew up into Major League Baseball, but once I got out of college in the early 90s, I'm not sure when exactly, early mid-90s or whatever, I haven't really followed Major League Baseball as much. With all of this talent that Vitello's been recruiting and putting out, and as all these guys start to get in the league, it's just going to naturally draw me to want to watch Major League Baseball more. Because, I'm a Tennessee guy more than I am a pro guy, even in the NFL, pro basket. I always, where are the Tennessee players? So it's just kind of exciting to see this infusion of talent that's probably going to get called up into the majors.
Yeah, without question. And you always love the opportunity that people get when they have that chance to continue playing beyond college in any sport. And I'll never forget one of my very favorite balls of all time in terms of Tennessee baseball, Jeff Christensen, a product of Knoxville Catholic. He gets drafted by the Yankees, and oh goodness, I pulled for his individual success. Chase Headley is also another all-time great in terms of just incredible young man that you couldn't have a better representative for your university. He was an academic All-American as well as outstanding. He was drafted in the second round. He gets traded from the Padres to the Yankees. And so having been somebody who was not a fan of the Bronx Bombers, but I can't help but appreciate guys that get the opportunity to play for that organization. So I wish them great individual success, but that's where it stops.
And interestingly enough, something I think I heard from you on the radio, when Todd Helton was inducted into the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame, because the landscape is so different now with NIL and the popularity of college baseball coming on is just a lot more popular. Back in the day, not many people, the top players didn't go to college. But it was so interesting to me. I think I heard from you that Todd Helton's only the second SEC player to be inducted into the Pro Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
The big hurt, Frank Thomas.
Exactly.
Played at Auburn.
And that's going to change drastically.
That is going to change
in these next few years. But yes, Todd Helton, it is so hard to believe.
When I heard that, I thought, is that right? That is amazing.
It is. Because you had guys that played. I mean, Ed Bailey played at the University of Tennessee and went on, was an all-star in Major League Baseball as he had a long career. But I just think that, it is something because the Pac, now 12 and now not, was kind of the perennial baseball power. And you had Arizona State and you had Southern Cal. And so you've got so many from that area. And then you have the University of Texas doing what it's done for years and years with the most trips to the College World Series and the NCAA tournament, which is now, of course, joining the SEC next year along with Oklahoma. But as you saw, the Southeastern Conference, and Skip Bertman at LSU is probably the one that is the biggest reason for what it is now, because the power that he built in Baton Rouge, other tried to follow that path to success. And so, as you mentioned, there are more highly rated teams in the Southeastern Conference than in any other sport.
It's crazy. It's like half the top 15 teams almost?
Correct.
I mean, it's just crazy.
And you can wind up with 10 or more teams in the top 25. So it is ridiculous, the amount of talent and the level of competition in the SEC.
We're visiting with John Wilkerson. John, we've just got about 45 seconds here, but Shohei Ohtani, it's unbelievable what he's done in baseball, but it's been revolutionary not just with his play, but he just signed this 10-year contract for $700 million. Very groundbreaking. But then we've got this trouble with his interpreter, maybe gambling and violating baseball rules. Could you just touch quickly about on how you view that whole thing?
Well, the one thing that has not been a one-to-one connection is any gambling that's been done on baseball. But there's also the biggest fly in the ointment is the fact that California is still one of the last states that doesn't have legalized gambling. So right now, all gambling in the state of California is illegal. And so whether it was anything he had awareness of, the fact that there were wire transfers made from his account to this illegal bookie is going to be something that perhaps is eventually it has to be fully explained and investigated just to see. I don't think there's been no teammate that has said they think he gambles, but this is a pretty messy situation.
It's pretty messy. It's John Wilkerson. You can catch him every weekday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. on Sports Talk. It's great to have you with us. It's just been a pleasure to visit with you today.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. That's John Wilkerson. Thank you to Jennifer for engineering the show. Thank you to Jill for helping produce the show. You've been listening to More Living with Jim Brogan, only on the News and Talk of East Tennessee, News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.